your first Scherer talk.
First Scherer talk. I'm excited.
I like to call these performances, not lectures.
That's good. That way we're in the.
I think that
Are there any props?
somebody asked me. Yes, that's it, right? So somebody asked me if I could have been anything else except a teacher. Those were the questions I got. And I neglected to say that I think I would have been a very good stand-up comedian. I think that I'm hilarious. Just ask me. We haven't all figured that out.
You think you're hilarious?
Yeah, so do you. That's the problem.
Yeah, I do.
So anyways, all this being said, I do try to record my performances so that if you miss it or you want to go back and rewatch it, I'll upload it to YouTube and put the link in the folder. Okay? I know that I go. What?
What?
Oh, you were talking. I thought you had something to say.
No, I
All right. Like I said, God, 92 off the whole script. I got to start all over again. Take your seat. All right. You need to take notes. I would suggest in the future you can print out this PowerPoint and add to it. You can type on your Chromebooks, however you do it. But I'm going to go over things. I'm going to say you need to know this term. I'm going to say you need to write this down. This PowerPoint is very sketchy. There's very little to it, and there's a lot more than I add to it. All right. So, question. I know I don't know everybody's name because I'm old. I do know Jalen though. And how much should I say? Caitlin, what does it mean to be an American?
To be free of your own thoughts and opinions.
Okay. Neil? What's it mean to be an American? Nope. So there is one rule in this class. Actually, besides be nice and put your cell phones away. I'm coming up with more rules. But you're never allowed to say, that's what they said, or what he said, or what she said. Not allowed to say it. You got to come up with something else. What does it mean to be an American? And remember, if you don't answer, feel like a gopher on catch it.
To be a legal citizen living in America.
To be a legal citizen living in America.
Yep.
Be free. Kate.
They have to be legal in order to be American.
Pick someone else then.
The Constitution?
To be American means to be
The Constitution.
all right. How would you describe our current political culture? Our current political culture, or our political climate?
So like how's our government?
Huh? How would you describe our current political climate? Toxic.
Acid rain.
A mess.
I think we're doing really good.
You think we're doing pretty good? There's one in every crowd. One in every crowd. All right. So, why is our current political climate toxic? Ryan?
Couldn't tell you. I really like pay attention to that stuff.
Factions?
Money.
Okay. Maria, what do you think? Why is our current political climate toxic? Money. Be nice. Everybody has a different thought. What's going on? All right. Good. So, this first chapter is very much kind of an introduction of how we got where we are. right? And that's one of the reasons that I had you read Democracy in American by Tocqueville, or whatever his name is. Tocqueville. Because one of his observations about when he came over to study the United States, really kind of from like a social perspective, like social, not socialism, but like a sociological perspective. Like, why are we the way we are? Why is America the way it is? And he believed that it was very important when understanding the United States to understand how we started and why we started, okay? Which would be based on the ideas of equality and freedom, right, and rights. That people should, their opinion should be valued, and people should be the head of their government. Now, he wasn't naive enough to think that we had achieved that, right? Certainly, you know, when he looked at women in society and slaves in society, right? But we were founded on that was the ideal that we were striving for, right? Or certain ideals, right? The idea that we striving for. That we needed to know where we started, and what and how we started, and why we started. That was very vital in understanding the United States. Okay, this has very much evolved over time, right? When we look at things in the Declaration of Independence, it say things like all men are created equal. When we wrote the Declaration of Independence, were all men created equal? Were they treated equal? No, right? It's evolved, right? If we look at the Constitution, right? And the preamble, right? The introduction of the Constitution, it's gonna list all these goals that we'll look at here in a second. And it says, in order to form a more perfect union. Well, more perfect union to me is poor grammar. How do you have a more perfect union? What do you think? What's a more perfect union? Amelita? What does that mean? The idea of a more perfect union. How can you be more perfect? I mean, I couldn't be any more perfect than I already am. What do you think? Okay. What do they mean? In order to form a more perfect union.
Well, I think that they already have like a whoops with
You say whoops?
Yeah. With the art.
YouTube community advocates that the Articles of Confederation was a whoops.
Oh, great.
Go ahead.
But.
Don't worry, I don't have any followers.
That the Articles of Confederation were like sort of already like a, and so they knew that the Constitution probably would be altered in the future, probably would be like needed, like the country would evolve in certain ways.
Okay.
And so like, they can also say like in order to make a more perfect union is like they're making one better than others. Articles of Confederation.
Okay. Hannah?
I was just gonna say that like they're saying that it's already pretty good, they just wanna make it better.
Okay. I think both of those are really answers. I also think it's the principle that are we ever really gonna get there? Are we ever as a country or as a government or as a society ever going to be perfect? You know? And when we look at what the goals of the preamble are, we can evaluate, well, how far have we come in this particular area, right? Like how have we established justice for everybody? How have we promoted the general welfare? How have we secured our blessings of liberty, right? That we're never gonna quite get there, all right? So it's important to find out, you know, looking at, I can't disagree with some of you when you're saying our political climate is toxic. I can't necessarily disagree with you that maybe things aren't as bad as people say they are. But there's a reason why we are where we are at, and it started very early on, okay? So, what are some reasons that people immigrated to the United States to begin with? Huh?
To escape religious persecution.
Okay, religious persecution, good, what else?
A new beginning.
Just starting over, okay? People in Georgia are basically all prisoners, right? New opportunities. Okay. obviously some people didn't come here to the United States by choice. Okay? Which is another thing that makes the United States unique. Question. So we have all these different people. People came to the United States for very different reasons, right? People came to the United States, it's called the United States, but for very different backgrounds, different professions, different religions, different ethnicities, right? This makes it someplace like New York very unique. But what does that mean politically? With all these different characteristics. What do we call these characteristics? Ethnicity, race, gender, job. What's a fancy word for those? It is diversity, but we have a political term we can use. Demographics. That's an important word to talk about demographics, right? What's the demographics of Ohio, right? Okay, so what does it mean politically to have all these different groups? They're all going to have what? Different opinions, different idea, things that are going to benefit them, right? What benefits farmers isn't going to benefit someone that owns the printing press and the newspaper, right? So New York is a really good example of this in New York City, right? It's kind of a microcosm of this diversity that exists in the United States. What theory of government, or where power in government really lies, is this explained? Just watch the video. Different groups, or as Madison would like to call them, different factions. What theory of government is that called? Where really power in society or power in government rests with different groups of people. Not to the hyper part yet. So just take the hyper part off. It's pluralism, right? We call it pluralism. You might see pluralist theories, the same thing, right? That real power in government rests with different groups of people, whether it's farmers, business owners, merchants, artisans, whatever. And the problem can become, though, is that each of these groups have very different what? They have different interests, and they may not have the best interest of the other groups in mind, okay? Which is why Madison probably took a lot of time in writing what? Which one? Okay, 10, right? Okay. And it's also going to become very evident when we get to the next chapter and talk about the articles and the ratification of the Constitution and so forth, is that why each individual colony was very different, right? Well, from somebody from Georgia saying we have nothing in common with someone from New York. Why should we be concerned about someone from New York? We're not the same religion. We don't have the same jobs, right? And so this pluralistic idea is very old in the United States, okay, from the very beginning, because of the people that settled here and why they settled here, okay? All right. Somebody mentioned the idea of religious persecution, okay? And this is certainly a founding principle of our government and written into our Bill of Rights, okay? But why did the Puritans immigrate to North America? Why did the Puritans come here? You don't need to write this down. I'm not going to ask why did the Puritans come here. Because of what? They were being persecuted. And people, and groups of people that are automatically being persecuted and have the chance to start over, what do they usually take the time to do? Start persecuting other people. Puritans were the most tolerant people in the world, weren't they? Right? I mean, they burned witches. Who does that? Witches are cool. Okay? So, right, and this whole city on a hill, right? The Puritans had this idea that they were going to come to the New World, to Plymouth, and that the city on a hill would be a shining utopia and example for all to see. But in order to do that, right, we had to have a very strict code of authority, and you had to follow these laws, and the government had to do this, and you couldn't do this. Okay? But here's another thing that was important to Puritans, is still largely ingrained in American culture is individualism. Individualism. What's individualism? Being your own person. What else? Try to always think of things, not always, but in this class, think of things politically. What does it mean to believe in individualism? Individual. Believe it. Okay. Right to believe it. Okay. Doesn't it have it with it the idea that you're responsible for who? You're responsible to provide for yourself. You're responsible to provide for your family, right? Individualism, right? How many of you ever heard the term the Puritan work ethic? Ever heard that? Okay. So if I were to ask you today, which of the two political parties would say, and I put that in air quotes, that individualism is a very important part of being American, which party do you say would say that? Yeah, Republicans would, right? Okay. Now, challenges to Puritanism. I'm not going to ask you to know all these people, okay? But it is important, a couple of the ideas that they espouse and what they did through their experiences that are important and get ingrained into our Bill of Rights. Roger Williams, right, we're going to credit with the first idea of separation of church and state. What is separation of church and state? Zach? What's separation of church and state?
So like, it's not having your religious beliefs affect the outcomes of like national law.
Of national laws?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, good. What does separation of church and state mean?
Your religion won't affect like the government's ideas. or
Okay.
whatever.
Okay. Yeah. Right. We literally talk about a wall that's supposed to figuratively exist between religious principles, religious faith, and what our government does, right? And we enshrine this in our First Amendment with what we call the Establishment Clause. Okay. And the Establishment Clause basically says that the government cannot establish a religion. Okay. You know, we used to have in this country early on, colonial days, right? In order to even like run for office or hold office, like you couldn't be Catholic, right? You had to pass a religious kind of litmus test, right? Couldn't be this and religion. We give Ann Hutchinson credit for the idea of religious tolerance. What part of our First Amendment is that going to be part of it? We have freedom of religion, right? We call this the free exercise clause. Okay. Now, do we have absolute freedom of religion and to practice our religion? No. Is there an absolute establishment clause, right? Is our government never involved in religion or with religious things? No, it is, right? Not a lot. Okay. But it's important to understand that religious freedom as a foundation of this country was, and I'm not trying to speak out of turn, but I want you to, it's that principle that still continued to grow. Now, was it early on religious freedom to practice forms of Christianity? Yes. But remember, what does the preamble to the Constitution say? In order to form a more perfect union, right? So the idea of religious tolerance and religious freedom and government's involvement with religion, we're still trying to get better, right? But we're not all just Christian anymore, right? Okay? So know that this is a founding principle that continues to evolve and change and grow and be a source of conflict. Okay? Question? Make sense? If you have a question, they invented this really cool thing. Do this. Everybody practice. Right? If you have a question, what do you do? All right. Here we go. What are these part of? Where do we find these? These are all in the what? Establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for common events. The preamble to the what? There was a preamble to the Constitution. Okay? These are goals. We haven't achieved them. We continue to achieve them. We get better. But the new government, the new Constitution was supposed to try to accomplish these things. To establish justice. We have laws. We have common principles and beliefs. We have a court system. Everybody is supposed to be treated equally under the law. What's that mean? You are equal under the law. Like a limbo stick? Yeah.
Like that you're all the same in like the government's eyes.
Regardless of
Race,
gender, income. How are we doing? Have we established justice for all? Justice for all. Why not? There is. There's still discrimination. We can't just give somebody the right to vote and say everybody's equal all of a sudden just because now they have the right to vote. Doesn't work that way. Right? So establish justice. Ensure domestic tranquility. What does domestic mean? Here, at home, peace, right? We have police forces, we have armed services. What else do we try to do to maintain peace? How is a society at peace? And it's not always like military action. How do you do that? Foster, you be nice. Be nice. People out there. What about trying to establish a system of government that gives people opportunities, right? Are people more tranquil when they have a job? They can put food on their table. Are people more tranquil when they can express themselves? When they can, right? Right. Provide for the common defense. Okay. On all days, and right on September 11th, do we sometimes fail at these? Okay. Do you remember that? President is commander-in-chief would be an example of this. What does the president being commander-in-chief mean? He's so loud. I think it's funny. I like the guy, but he's loud. Madison. The president is commander-in-chief of what? Of the military. So the president is the head of the military. Is the president of the United States allowed to be a military officer and be president of the United States at the same time? No. Why not? Why don't we want our president to also be a 5-star general? Yeah, most places end up being like a dictatorship, right? You pose for photos like this. So why is it important for the benefit of having a civilian be in charge of our military? Besides not maybe establishing a dictatorship, military dictatorship. Yeah.
So the president can get like other things done and the military can stay like separate?
Yeah, I mean, if you were the leader of the military too, you probably would be favoring the military, right? You're not supposed to just do that. Okay, you're supposed to take the interest of civilians, right? And we're not going to just go to war, right? Because the war is not just going to affect the military; it's going to affect the entire population, right? So, that's a good idea. All right. This does not mean welfare. This does not mean the SNAP program or temporary aid to families in need or Social Security. What does promote the general welfare mean? Maddie. You need to promote the general welfare. ideal. Pick somebody, Annie. What do you think, guys? What's it mean? Promote the general welfare. Our Constitution, our government is supposed to do things that does what?
It's
Helps
for
who?
the people.
Or the people? You my people?
American.
Try to do what benefits the most people, that benefits everyone, that doesn't just benefit certain groups of people. Okay? Here are some kind of important things that our country believes in, right? We believe in individuals, right? We believe in the idea of individualism, individual rights. Okay? Question. Does the Constitution give you rights? The Constitution give you rights? Constitution give you rights? Does the Constitution give you rights? Does it give you rights? Does it give you rights? Does it give you rights? The Constitution gives you no rights. You already have them. Your rights are what? Your rights are natural. Your Constitution is supposed to do what for your rights? Protect them. Ensure them. Okay? We're also supposed to be united. Right? Again, maybe on any other day, right? You guys weren't born, but it's been a rare sight to see how united this country was after the attack on 9/11. We're supposed to be a united people. I don't know how good we're doing with this one right now. But they're also a country that is very diverse. Right? The United States is probably historically the most diverse nation that has ever existed. So here's a question, guys. How do you put together a government that has this and wants to do that? You give everybody the right to participate, right? You can vote. How else do we do it? Constitution. We have constitutional principles in place to try to balance this. We have federalism. We give states powers, because we know the states are different. We let local governments do things. We have checks and balances. We have minority protections, right? We don't let the majority completely trample on the rights of minority groups. But the idea I'm trying to get to is that it makes doing this very difficult, doesn't it? When we're like this, to do that. When I try to get you to wrap your head around the fact that answers to policy decisions and issues aren't necessarily simple. Okay, coming back to the beginning of the performance. Right? That the way that the United States started, the way that America started, and who we are because of that, makes doing this a difficult process. And in the United States, and no, any place, sorry, we're going to talk about that process in the eyes of how do we do that politically. Okay. All right. Questions? No? How'd I do? Out of 10. A 9, 9.5, 8, 7. All right, that's 8. Correct.
16.
All right, how many would give me a 5? 6, 7, 10. All right.
I was gonna say 8, but you skipped.
We'll finish tomorrow, guys.
And I give you a 10 out of 10 on your test, man. You did the same for me.
Well, it was obvious what it was.
Now I have to make these.
Yeah, 2.